Hey y'all, this is David on the Hubbard homestead. We got a beautiful, slightly overcast day. It's perfect for working on the homestead and working on projects. I don't know if you can see one of our little goats resting, and it's Mama. This is the maternity pen or the maternity ward, and those little goats are pretty fresh. I think you may have heard about it if you followed our posts. Our little girl that was born was less than 2 pounds. So if you can believe that, she was 1 pound, 15 ounces. Super tiny little thing. So this YouTube video is all about rotational grazing and the importance of moving animals and letting pasture rest. And so basically, all over the US, there is exhausted farmland, pastures that are overgrazed, crops that never give the soil a break. We're constantly tilling, constantly plowing, and disturbing the subsoil microenvironment. And so you see, it's really what goes on under the soil that supports the grass and the pasture above it. It's kind of like the tip of the iceberg is what we see above the soil with the grass. So we believe, giving the land rest is actually biblical. We believe that resting ourselves is biblical. And so God rested on the seventh day, and that blessing still remains for today. Of course, this is not a salvific issue. It's not a matter of salvation. But there is a blessing when we let the land rest, and even when we let ourselves rest. So we still live in a world created by God, and there are still principles in place if we are to live an abundant life. And Jesus said, I came to give you life and life abundant. So just be thinking about that. Think of the law of sowing and reaping, the law of gravity, the second law of thermodynamics. So we still live in a universe that operates by these laws and principles that God put in place all the way back in the beginning. So giving the land rest actually increases yields, productivity, and soil health. So basically how we know when to rotate our animals is we go by the rule of 3. So let's walk into this pasture here, and we use a what we call a spoken wheel system. So it's super easy to move our goats. We have 4 permanent paddocks that are probably, a little bit less than a 1/4 acre apiece. And so basically if we move the goats every 5 or 6 days, then that gives each paddock about 21 to 28 days of rest, give or take. But we follow these 3 rules. Basically, we look to see if we know to move the goats when 1/3 of the pasture is eaten, 1/3 of the pasture is trampled, and 1/3 of the pasture is untouched. So that's when we know to move the goats. So basically, rotational grazing, especially when it comes to goats, how this applies to us is that we're worried about internal parasites. And you see, we never blanket medicate our goats for worms ever, because the worms live on the blades of grass and they hatch eggs on the grass, and then the goats come and eat the contaminated grass. But when there are no goats for 21 days or longer, then the worms go through their life cycle and they die out. So this equals a reduced pathogen load, and the goat's immune system can handle the lessened burden. So when we let the pasture rest with no goats on it, for one, the rest itself helps kill off the worm population and the parasite population. For 2, the rainfall washes the goat poop further into the ground and helps it decompose and cleanse the pasture. And then for 3, the sunshine provides sterilizing UV rays. And it's really interesting because we use UV rays to sterilize medical equipment and all kinds of things. So we cleanse the pasture above the soil and decrease the parasite and worm load, but beneath the soil is swimming with microbes and probiotics, and those are beneficial bacteria. People who get their hands and feet in contact with soil are shown to receive benefits of decreased anxiety and depression and an immune boost just from touching dirt. So if you want to boost your immune system, go play in the dirt, just like all the little kids do. 70%. So this is powerful, but this is a fact, that 70% of your immune system is in your gut. And the more bacteria you have, and the more biodiverse the bacteria in your gut, the healthier you become. So basically, we're on a mission to restore gut health here at the Hubbard Homestead. So let me just put a couple of questions out there. Why does 1 in 5 Americans suffer from autoimmune disease? And why is leaky gut at an all-time high here in the US? and not to mention all the other digestive disorders. So especially in a day when we're dealing with superbugs, and I'm sure many of y'all have heard about that. So basically, multi-drug resistant organisms are on the rise. We call some of these, VRE, vancomycin resistant enterococci. We have methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, etc. Antibiotics are way overprescribed and destroying our health. So don't get me wrong, there's a place for antibiotics, but not for routine everyday use. Two of our children have had 0 antibiotics ever. One of our child had antibiotics once in their life. Basically, I avoid them. There's a book I encourage you to read or get the Spark Notes on. It's called Missing Microbes, How the Overuse of Antibiotics is Fueling Our Modern Plagues. It's written by Martin Blazer. He's a medical doctor. So I encourage you to look up that book, Missing Microbes. So just like antibiotics are overprescribed and causing major health problems, here in the US, the Western world, dewormer medications for animals are overused and ultimately becoming ineffective in creating super resistant parasites. Yes, you heard that right. So if a goat farmer blanket deworms, meaning he deworms the whole herd, then that means that any worms that survive become immune to the dewormer. So the next generation of worms that grows up on that farmer's pasture requires increased doses or another dewormer altogether. And this is a big problem because there are only a few dewormers out there, and now we really need that. And when we really need them, there's medication resistance, meaning it's not effective. And this concept is the same for every animal, just like it is the same for humans, becoming resistant to these drugs. So here at the Hubbard Homestead, we are creating systems for the animal that are healthy and natural. It may be more inconvenient, but the results speak for themselves. I mean, look at how happy this goat is. She's trying to eat my shirt. That's a goat for you. So here at the Hubbard Homestead, we use herbal dewormers that are found in nature, like black walnut, garlic, etc. And when we do use chemical dewormers, we use it on a case-by-case basis and never ever give it to multiple goats at the same time. We actually also take it a step further and run microscopic fecal egg counts and parasite identification with our own microscope here at our house, basically so that we know exactly what parasite we are dealing with. Then we treat it, then we know how to treat it effectively, and then if we feel like the animal's not responding, then we can run another fecal egg count with our microscope. And I read a study, and so many Georgia farms, goat herds are already resistant to several medications, and the numbers are actually staggering and very alarming at how many farms in Georgia have resistance to these medications. So just a side note, these deworming medications, they're for internal parasites like barber pole worm and even tapeworm. So this is not the same as coccidiosis. Coccidia is not a worm or a parasite. It's actually a single-celled protozoa, so it has a single cell, and coccidia cannot be treated with deworming drugs. So to keep it clear, we actually do prophylactically give our baby goats medication for coccidia, basically a coccidiostat. We use one specifically called toltrazurol. Basically, we give that to them until their immune system is old enough to handle itself, which is usually about 4 to 6 months old. However, the antiparasitic drugs, the dewormers that I'm talking about, some people call them wormers. It's drugs like ivermectin, Safeguard, Cydectin, Moxidectin, Valbazin, just to name a few. And so basically, when we talk about, just to kind of wrap things up, when we talk about giving the land rest, we cannot forget about the blessing of resting ourselves. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 9 in the New Testament says, "So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest." So I don't know about you, but I am part of the people of God. It says that there's a Sabbath rest for the people of God. So let us therefore strive to enter that rest. we have always tried to take a day of rest. In different seasons of our life, it has looked differently. You know, when I was in college, well, when I was in anesthesia school, you know, Sundays was our day of rest because that's when we went to church. So that day looked different. I didn't do any studying by myself. I actually averaged 30 hours a week of studying during anesthesia school. That was outside of class, outside of group things. I averaged 30 hours a week of studying, like solo. So I didn't do any solo studying on Sundays, and God blessed me. I did fine. So I just encourage y'all rest. You know, it's going to look different in different seasons, but you know, like it says in Hebrews chapter 4, strive to enter that rest so that you can receive the blessing. There's something about it. You know, it's really interesting. Other cultures have tried to change the workday, but we see the 7-day model is all the way back in Genesis when God rested on the 7th day. Other cultures in the past, like centuries ago, there was a culture, they tried to do a 10-day work week and a 14-day work week and then a day of rest, and they burned out. It didn't last. You know, people rioted and put buildings up in flames and something like that. And so there's definitely value in resting. You know, God has modeled it for us. He rested, so I encourage you, go ahead and rest. So here's just a look at our pasture. Just look at how beautiful this pasture is. These goats are absolutely loving it. Look at how tall that grass is. So this right here is where they came from. We just rotated the goats yesterday, and so this right here is where the goats ate, and you can tell it's a little bit shorter. Then we went ahead and rotated them. We have electric fence is what separates our pastures so that we can rotate them. The goats respect it. We'll do a video on electric fence soon. But I think that's enough for today. We covered a lot of major points. A lot of this is going to take time to digest. As we started diving into just regenerative farming and regenerating the land, and you know, there's a ton to learn in just some of these concepts. So if you have any questions, just holler out and stay tuned. God bless you.